The woman across the restaurant was laughing too loud, her head thrown back in a way that made her diamond bracelet catch the light. Sarah's fork stopped halfway to her mouth as she stared at the familiar piece of jewelry. It was her grandmother's bracelet, the one with the 3 diamonds arranged in a perfect triangle, the one with the tiny scratch on the clasp that happened when Sarah was 12 and dropped it on her bedroom floor. The one that had been sitting in her jewelry box just this morning. Her husband Robert sat across from the laughing woman, his hand covering hers on the white tablecloth. He was supposed to be at a work dinner with clients. He was supposed to be discussing the new marketing campaign for his company. Instead, he was feeding chocolate cake to a redhead who was wearing Sarah's most precious piece of jewelry. Sarah felt her world tilt sideways. The fancy restaurant around her became a blur of soft lighting and quiet conversation. Her own dinner companion, her sister Lisa, was still talking about her daughter's soccer game, completely unaware that Sarah's 8-year marriage had just shattered into a million pieces. "Sarah? You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost," Lisa said, following Sarah's stare across the room. "I need to go to the bathroom," Sarah whispered, standing on shaky legs. She grabbed her purse and walked carefully toward the back of the restaurant, making sure to pass close enough to Robert's table to confirm what she already knew in her heart. It was definitely her bracelet. And Robert was definitely cheating. In the bathroom, Sarah locked herself in a stall and tried to breathe. Her hands were shaking as she pulled out her phone. Part of her wanted to march over to that table and cause a scene. Part of her wanted to call Robert right now and scream at him. But a bigger part of her, the part that had helped her become a successful accountant, told her to be smart about this. She took a picture of herself in the bathroom mirror. Her brown skin looked pale under the harsh lights. Her usually perfect hair was still in place, but her eyes looked hollow. She needed to remember this moment, the moment her life changed forever. When she returned to the table, Lisa was checking her phone. "Sorry, work emergency," Lisa said, not looking up. "You know how it is." Sarah did know. She knew about work and responsibility and doing the right thing. She thought Robert knew about those things too. Apparently she was wrong. "Actually, can we get the check?" Sarah asked. "I'm not feeling well." "Of course, honey. You do look a little green." Lisa signaled for the waiter. "Probably something you ate earlier. If only it were that simple." Sarah glanced back at Robert's table. He was kissing the woman's hand now, right over her grandmother's bracelet. The sight made Sarah's stomach turn, but she forced herself to watch. She needed to see this. She needed to burn this image into her memory so she would never forget why she was about to do what she was going to do. The drive home was a blur. Lisa offered to come in, but Sarah said she just needed to sleep. She hugged her sister goodbye and watched her drive away before going inside the house she shared with Robert. Their house was beautiful, a 2-story colonial in the suburbs with a perfectly manicured lawn and flower boxes under every window. Sarah had picked out every piece of furniture, every paint color, every decoration. She had made this place a home for them. She had made it perfect. Now it felt like a prison. Sarah went straight to their bedroom and opened her jewelry box. Sure enough, the bracelet was gone. In its place was a note in Robert's handwriting. "Borrowed this for tonight. Thanks, babe." Thanks, babe. Like she was some roommate he could take things from without asking. Like 8 years of marriage meant nothing. Like her grandmother's memory meant nothing. Sarah sat on their bed, the bed they had picked out together, the bed where they had planned their future together, the bed where Robert had promised to love her forever, and finally let herself cry. But only for 5 minutes. She timed it on her phone. After 5 minutes, she dried her eyes and got to work. If Robert thought he could play games with her, he was about to learn just how wrong he was. Sarah had always been good with numbers, good at solving problems, good at finding solutions. This was just another problem to solve. She opened her laptop and created a new folder on her desktop. She named it Project Freedom. Then she started taking pictures of the note Robert left, of her empty jewelry box, of their joint bank statements she could access online. She documented everything. By the time Robert came home at midnight, claiming his work dinner had run late, Sarah was in bed pretending to sleep. He slipped in beside her, smelling like perfume that wasn't hers, and whispered that he loved her. Sarah kept her eyes closed and her breathing steady. She had learned her first lesson of the night. Robert was a very good liar. Tomorrow she would start learning how to be an even better one. The next morning, Robert kissed her goodbye like nothing had happened. He even complimented her coffee and asked about her day. Sarah smiled and told him she loved him too, just like she had every morning for 8 years. But everything had changed. Sarah was no longer the trusting wife who believed every word her husband said. She was a woman with a plan, and Robert had no idea what was coming for him. As she watched him drive away in his expensive car, the car they had both worked to pay for, Sarah felt something she hadn't expected. Not sadness or anger, though those were there too. She felt excited. For the first time in years, she felt truly alive. Robert thought he was so clever, sneaking around behind her back. He thought she was just a boring accountant who would never suspect anything. He thought wrong. Sarah poured herself another cup of coffee and opened her laptop. She had work to do. Sarah had always been proud of her life with Robert. They met in college, where she was studying accounting and he was in business school. He was charming and ambitious, with big dreams about starting his own company someday. She was practical and smart, with a head for numbers and a heart full of love for this confident man who made her laugh. They got married right after graduation. Sarah still remembered their wedding day, how handsome Robert looked in his tuxedo, how her grandmother had cried when she walked down the aisle wearing the diamond bracelet that was now decorating another woman's wrist. For 8 years they had built what everyone thought was the perfect marriage. Robert climbed the ladder at his marketing firm while Sarah established herself as one of the best accountants in the city. They bought their dream house, took vacations to Europe, talked about having children someday when the time was right. Sarah had always believed they were a team. When Robert worked late, she supported him. When he traveled for business, she missed him but understood it was for their future. When he wanted to buy expensive things, she made it work in their budget. She had been the perfect wife. Sitting at her kitchen table the morning after her discovery, Sarah pulled up their joint bank accounts on her laptop. What she found made her feel sick all over again. Over the past 6 months, Robert had been spending money she didn't know about. Expensive dinners at restaurants they never went to together. Hotel charges in the city when he claimed to be working late at the office. A jewelry store purchase for $1,500 just 2 weeks ago. Probably the earrings the redhead had been wearing last night. But the worst part was the cash withdrawals. $2,000 a month, taken out in small amounts so Sarah wouldn't notice. Money that should have been going toward their savings for the house they wanted to buy in the mountains. Money that was instead funding Robert's affair. Sarah printed everything. Every bank statement, every credit card bill, every receipt she could find. She organized it all in her Project Freedom folder, both on her computer and in a physical file she hid in her home office. Her phone buzzed with a text from Robert, "Working late again tonight. Don't wait up. Love you." The same lie he had been telling for months. Sarah texted back, "Love you too. Be safe." But instead of feeling hurt, Sarah felt something else, determination. Robert might be a good liar, but Sarah was better with details. And the details were about to destroy him. That afternoon, Sarah left work early and drove to the restaurant where she had seen Robert the night before. She spoke to the hostess, a young woman who remembered the couple from last night. "Oh yes, they come in every Tuesday," the hostess said. "Such a sweet couple. They always request the same table by the window. Every Tuesday." Sarah had been working late on Tuesdays for the past 3 months, trying to finish a big project for one of her clients. Robert knew her schedule. He had been planning this. "Have they been coming here long?" Sarah asked, pretending to be interested in the restaurant for her own date night. "Maybe 4 or 5 months. They always seem so happy together. He always brings her flowers." Sarah thanked the hostess and left. In her car, she sat for a moment and absorbed this information. 4 or 5 months. This wasn't just a recent mistake or a moment of weakness. This was a relationship. Robert had been living a double life for months, and Sarah had been completely blind to it. She drove home and called her sister Lisa. "I need to tell you something," Sarah said when Lisa answered. "But I need you to promise you won't try to talk me out of what I'm about to do." "Sarah, you're scaring me. What's going on?" Sarah told her everything, the bracelet, the restaurant, the bank statements, the regular Tuesday dinners. By the end, Lisa was quiet for a long moment. "Oh, honey," Lisa finally said. "I'm so sorry. What can I do?" "Nothing yet. I just needed someone to know the truth. I can't pretend everything is normal when I'm around you anymore." "Are you going to confront him?" "Not yet. I need to be smart about this. I need to know everything before I make my move." "Sarah, please be careful. I know you're hurt and angry, but don't do anything you'll regret." "I won't regret protecting myself," Sarah said. "I've been taking care of Robert for 8 years. It's time I took care of me." That evening, Sarah cooked Robert's favorite dinner, steak with garlic potatoes and green beans. She set the table with their good china and lit candles. When Robert came home, he was surprised but pleased. "What's the occasion?" he asked, kissing her cheek. Sarah had to resist pulling away from the lips that had been kissing another woman. "No occasion. I just wanted to do something nice for my husband." They ate dinner and talked about their days. Robert told her about a difficult client and a presentation he was working on. He seemed relaxed and happy, like a man without a care in the world. Like a man who wasn't destroying his marriage one lie at a time. "You know I love you, right?" Sarah said as they were cleaning up the dishes. "Of course I do. I love you too. You're the best thing that ever happened to me." Sarah smiled and kissed him. "I'm glad you think so." Later that night, after Robert fell asleep, Sarah lay awake staring at the ceiling. She thought about all the times over the past few months when Robert had seemed distant or distracted. All the times he had worked late or gone out of town. All the times she had worried something was wrong and he had reassured her that everything was fine. She thought about the woman in the restaurant, laughing and wearing her grandmother's bracelet. The woman had seemed genuinely happy, like she believed Robert loved her. Sarah wondered if the woman knew Robert was married. She wondered if the woman cared. But mostly Sarah thought about her plan. She needed more information before she could act. She needed to know who this woman was, how they met, what Robert had told her about his life. She needed to know if there had been others before this one. Most importantly, she needed to make sure that when she finally made her move, Robert would lose everything he had taken from her and more. This wasn't just about ending their marriage. This was about making sure Robert understood the consequences of his choices. Sarah had always been a patient person. She could wait a little longer to get her revenge just right. After all, she had the rest of her life to be happy. Robert's happiness, on the other hand, was about to come to an end. Sarah had always been good at observing details. It was what made her an excellent accountant. Now she turned those skills toward studying her husband like he was a complicated financial puzzle that needed solving. She started small. When Robert came home from work, she paid attention to things she had previously ignored. The way he immediately went to shower, claiming he was sweaty from his commute. The way he put his phone face down on the counter and never left it unattended. The way he started doing his own laundry, saying he wanted to help out more around the house. At first, these small changes had made Sarah happy. She thought Robert was becoming more considerate. Now she realized he was just covering his tracks. Sarah began keeping a journal, writing down everything she noticed. Tuesday night, claimed to work late, came home at 11:30 p.m. smelling like perfume. Wednesday morning, took phone into bathroom during shower. Thursday evening, received text during dinner, claimed it was work, but smiled while reading it. The hardest part was acting normal. Every morning, Sarah made Robert coffee and kissed him goodbye. Every evening, she asked about his day and listened to his lies with a smile. Every night, she lay beside him in their bed and pretended to sleep while he checked his phone under the covers, thinking she couldn't see the light. 3 weeks into her investigation, Sarah decided to take a risk. Robert was in the shower and his phone was charging on his nightstand. Sarah had watched him enter his passcode dozens of times. It was her birthday, which would have been sweet if he wasn't using the phone to cheat on her. Her hands shook as she opened his text messages. There it was, a conversation with someone named Jess that went back months. Sarah quickly scrolled through the messages, her heart pounding. "Can't wait to see you tonight, beautiful. Last night was amazing. You're amazing. I told my wife I'm working late again. She never suspects anything." Sarah felt like she might throw up, but she kept reading. There were pictures, not inappropriate ones, but photos of Jess at various places around the city. A coffee shop Sarah had never been to. A park where Sarah and Robert used to walk together. The restaurant where Sarah had first seen them. But the worst message was from just 3 days ago. "I'm ready to tell my husband about us. Are you ready to tell your wife?" Robert had responded, "Soon, baby. I just need to figure out the right way. Sarah's been my life for so long, but you're my future." Sarah quickly took pictures of the most important messages with her own phone, then put Robert's phone back exactly where she found it. She made it to the bathroom down the hall just in time to throw up. When Robert came out of the shower, he found Sarah sitting on their bed looking pale. "You feeling okay, babe?" he asked, genuine concern in his voice. It was moments like this that confused Sarah the most. How could he seem to care about her while planning to leave her? "Just a little tired," Sarah said. "I think I might be getting sick. You should take some vitamin C. I don't want you catching anything." He kissed her forehead and Sarah had to resist pulling away. That day at work, Sarah couldn't concentrate. She kept thinking about Robert's text message. "Sarah's been my life for so long, but you're my future." 8 years of marriage and she had become his past tense. During her lunch break, Sarah drove to the coffee shop she had seen in one of Jess's photos. It was a small place downtown, the kind of artsy spot that served expensive lattes and had local artwork on the walls. Sarah ordered a coffee and sat by the window watching. She didn't have to wait long. At 1:15 p.m., Robert walked in with the redhead from the restaurant. They sat at a corner table, holding hands and talking quietly. Sarah watched from behind her newspaper as Robert fed Jess a piece of his sandwich, the same way he used to do with Sarah when they were dating. They looked happy together. Comfortable. Like a real couple. Sarah stayed for 30 minutes, taking pictures with her phone and listening to bits of their conversation. She learned that Jess worked at a real estate office nearby, that she was divorced with no children, and that she believed Robert was separated from his wife and just waiting for the divorce to be finalized. So Robert was lying to both of them. He had told Jess that his marriage was already over, while telling Sarah that everything was fine. He was keeping both women in his life by making each one believe she was the only one who mattered. On her way back to work, Sarah made a decision. She was going to find out everything she could about Jessica before she made her next move. If Robert thought he could play games with two women's hearts, he was about to learn that some games have consequences he never saw coming. That evening, Sarah cooked dinner like nothing had happened. She smiled and asked Robert about his day, even though she knew exactly how he had spent his lunch hour. "Oh, just the usual boring stuff," Robert said. "Meetings, paperwork, you know how it is." "I do," Sarah said, passing him the potatoes. "I definitely know how it is." After dinner, Robert said he needed to work on a presentation for the next day. He went to his home office and closed the door. Sarah cleaned the kitchen and then quietly walked past his office. She could hear him on the phone, speaking in the soft, romantic voice he used to use with her. "I miss you already," he was saying. "I wish I could see you tonight, but Sarah's been clingy lately. I think she might suspect something." Sarah pressed her back against the wall outside his office door. Clingy? She had been nothing but supportive and understanding. She had given him space when he said he needed to work. She had trusted him completely. "No, she doesn't know anything for sure," Robert continued. "She's not smart enough to figure it out. She just does her little accounting job and comes home and cooks dinner. She's not like you, Jess. You're exciting. You make me feel alive again." Sarah had heard enough. She quietly went upstairs to their bedroom and sat on the bed, staring at her reflection in the mirror across the room. The woman looking back at her wasn't the same woman who had discovered her husband's affair 3 weeks ago. That woman had been hurt and confused. This woman was angry and determined. Robert thought she wasn't smart enough to figure out his lies. He thought she was just a boring wife who would never suspect her perfect husband of cheating. He was about to discover just how wrong he was. Sarah opened her laptop and started researching. If she was going to destroy Robert's life the way he had destroyed hers, she needed to know everything about his girlfriend, his work, his finances, and his plans. She needed to be 3 steps ahead of him at all times. By the time Robert came to bed an hour later, Sarah was pretending to sleep. He slipped in beside her and whispered that he loved her, just like he did every night. But Sarah was done being the woman who whispered back that she loved him too. She was becoming someone else entirely, someone who was going to make Robert regret the day he decided to betray her. Someone who was going to win. Sarah had never thought she would need a divorce lawyer, but here she was, sitting in the waiting room of Peterson and Associates at 8 in the morning, clutching a folder full of evidence against her husband. She had chosen this law firm carefully. Margaret Peterson was known for being tough, thorough, and expensive, exactly what Sarah needed. She had also handled several high-profile divorce cases where wives had come out ahead, despite their husbands trying to hide assets. "Mrs. Williams?" A tall woman with silver hair and sharp eyes emerged from an office. "I'm Margaret Peterson. Please come in." Margaret's office was impressive floor-to-ceiling law books, diplomas covering one wall, and a view of the city that probably cost more than Sarah's annual salary. But what impressed Sarah most was the way Margaret looked at her, like she was seeing a person, not just another cheating husband case. "Tell me what's going on," Margaret said, settling behind her desk. Sarah started with the bracelet and told the whole story, the restaurant, the bank statements, the text messages, the coffee shop meetings. Margaret listened without interrupting, occasionally taking notes. "You've been thorough," Margaret said when Sarah finished. "Most people come in here with just their feelings hurt and no proof. You've built a solid case already." "I'm an accountant," Sarah said. "I believe in documentation." "Good. Now let's talk about what you want out of this divorce." Sarah had thought about this question for weeks. "I want the house. I want half of everything we built together. And I want him to understand that actions have consequences." Margaret smiled, the first time her serious expression had changed. "I like you already. Now here's what we're going to do." Over the next hour, Margaret explained Sarah's rights under state law. Because they had been married for 8 years and had built their assets together, Sarah was entitled to half of everything: the house, the savings, Robert's retirement account, even part of his business if he started one. But here's the thing, Margaret said. Your husband is spending marital assets on his girlfriend. Every dinner, every hotel room, every piece of jewelry he's bought her, that's money that belongs to both of you. We can ask for that back. Sarah felt a spark of satisfaction. How much are we talking about? Based on what you've shown me, probably $15,000 to $20,000 over the past 6 months. The court doesn't like it when one spouse uses joint money to fund an affair. Margaret also recommended a private investigator. You've done great work documenting his behavior, but we need professional evidence if this goes to trial. Photos, video, witness statements, the works. Sarah left the law office feeling empowered for the first time in weeks. She wasn't just a victim anymore. She was a woman with a plan and the legal backing to make it work. Her next stop was across town to meet with the private investigator Margaret had recommended. James Crawford was a former police detective who specialized in marital cases. His office was smaller than Margaret's but filled with high-tech equipment that looked like something from a spy movie. I've read your file, James said after they shook hands. Your lawyer sent over the basics. You've done most of my job for me already. I want to make sure we have everything we need, Sarah said. I don't want him to be able to deny anything. Fair enough. I'll put a tail on your husband starting tomorrow. We'll document everywhere he goes, everyone he meets with how much he spends. We'll also do a background check on the girlfriend, find out if she has any secrets that might be useful. James explained that most cheating spouse cases were straightforward, but Robert's case had some interesting angles. He's telling the girlfriend that he's separated but still living with you for financial reasons. He's telling you that he's working late. He's living 2 completely different lives. Is that unusual? More common than you'd think, but it shows a level of planning and deception that courts don't like. This isn't a guy who made one mistake. This is someone who's been systematically lying to multiple people for months. Sarah signed James's contract and wrote him a check from her personal account, the one Robert didn't have access to. It was expensive, but Sarah considered it an investment in her future. That afternoon, Sarah went back to work and tried to focus on her client's financial problems instead of her own. But her mind kept wandering to the conversation with Margaret Peterson. The lawyer had asked her a question that stuck with her. What do you want your life to look like after this is over? Sarah realized she had been so focused on documenting Robert's betrayal that she hadn't thought much about what came next. What did she want her life to look like? She wanted to keep the house. It was the first place that had ever really felt like home to her. She wanted financial security so she could make her own choices instead of depending on someone else. But most of all, she wanted to feel like herself again. For months, she had been walking around feeling confused and hurt. She wanted to feel strong and confident and in control of her own life. That evening, Robert came home with flowers, a dozen red roses that probably cost $60. What's the occasion? Sarah asked, accepting them with a smile. No occasion. I just love my wife and wanted her to know it. Sarah put the flowers in water and thanked him with a kiss. But inside, she was thinking about the $15,000 Robert had spent on Jess over the past 6 months. $60 in flowers after months of lying felt like an insult. I love you too, Sarah said, because that's what the old Sarah would have said. The new Sarah was learning to play a role. Over dinner, Robert seemed more attentive than he had been in months. He asked about her day, complimented her cooking, and even suggested they plan a weekend getaway. Where would you like to go? Sarah asked. Maybe that bed and breakfast in the mountains we've talked about. We could use some time together, just the 2 of us. Sarah wondered if Robert was feeling guilty, or if Jess was pressuring him to make a decision about his marriage. Either way, his sudden attention felt like too little, too late. That sounds wonderful, Sarah said. Let me check my calendar and see when I can get time off work. But Sarah had no intention of going away with Robert. By the time he was ready to book a romantic weekend, he would be served with divorce papers instead. That night, as Robert slept beside her, Sarah lay awake thinking about her conversation with Margaret Peterson. The lawyer had warned her that the next few weeks would be difficult. Robert would probably become suspicious if Sarah changed her behavior too much. He might become angry when he realized she was investigating him. He might even try to turn their friends and family against her. But Sarah was ready for all of that. She had spent 8 years being the perfect wife, supporting Robert's dreams and putting his needs first. Now it was time to put herself first for once. She had a team of professionals helping her now, a lawyer who would protect her rights and a private investigator who would document every lie Robert told. She had evidence that would hold up in court and a plan that would give her the fresh start she deserved. Most importantly, she had something Robert didn't know she possessed: the patience to wait for exactly the right moment to strike. Robert thought he was so clever, managing 2 relationships at once. He had no idea that his boring, trusting wife was about to show him what real cleverness looked like. Sarah smiled in the darkness and finally fell asleep, more peaceful than she had felt in months. Sarah had been watching Jessica Martinez for 2 weeks, learning her routines and habits like she was studying for the most important test of her life. She knew that Jess got coffee at the same shop every morning at 7:30 a.m. She knew that Jess worked at Sunset Realty downtown and took her lunch break at 12:15 p.m. She knew that Jess went to yoga class every Monday and Wednesday evening at a studio 3 blocks from her apartment. What Sarah didn't know was whether Jess was a victim like her or a willing participant in Robert's deception. That question was about to be answered. Sarah had discovered something interesting during her research. Jess wasn't divorced like she had told Robert. She was married to a man named Tony Martinez, who worked as a construction supervisor and seemed to have no idea his wife was having an affair. The private investigator James had confirmed it. Tony Martinez left for work every morning at 6 a.m. and didn't come home until after 7 p.m. He worked hard, paid the bills, and trusted his wife completely. Just like Sarah had trusted Robert. Sarah made a decision that surprised even her. She was going to talk to Jess directly. On a Thursday afternoon, Sarah left work early and went to Sunset Realty. She had called ahead and made an appointment to look at houses, using a fake name and claiming she was relocating to the city for work. The real estate office was modern and busy, with agents at desks throughout an open floor plan. Sarah was greeted by a receptionist who directed her to wait in a small conference room. "Mrs. Johnson?" A woman appeared in the doorway and Sarah's breath caught. It was definitely Jess, the same red hair, the same bright smile, the same confidence that had attracted Robert. Up close, Jess was prettier than Sarah had expected. She was younger too, probably in her late 20s, with the kind of energy that made everyone around her feel more alive. Sarah could understand why Robert was attracted to her. "Yes, that's me," Sarah said, shaking Jess's hand. "Thank you for meeting with me." "Of course. I love helping people find their perfect home. Tell me what you're looking for." For the next 30 minutes, Sarah played the role of a house hunter while studying the woman who was sleeping with her husband. Jess was enthusiastic and knowledgeable about the local market. She was also wearing a wedding ring, a simple gold band that looked like it had been there for years. "Are you married?" Sarah asked casually as they looked at listings on Jess's computer. "I am," Jess said, her smile faltering slightly. "Though things have been complicated lately." "I'm sorry to hear that. Marriage can be challenging." Jess looked at Sarah with sudden intensity. "Can I ask you something? You seem like someone who has her life together. How do you know when it's time to make a big change?" Sarah felt a pang of sympathy for this woman who had no idea she was being lied to. "What kind of change are you thinking about?" "I've been unhappy in my marriage for a while. My husband is a good man, but we've grown apart. And recently I met someone who makes me feel alive again. But he's married too, and it's all so complicated." Sarah's heart was pounding, but she kept her voice steady. "That does sound complicated. Have you talked to your husband about how you're feeling?" "Not really. Tony works so hard and he's been so stressed lately. I don't want to add to his problems." Jess looked down at her hands. "The man I've been seeing says he's separated from his wife. He's just waiting for the right time to file for divorce. But sometimes I wonder if I'm being naive." Sarah felt a surge of anger at Robert, not at Jess. This woman was clearly struggling with guilt and confusion, believing lies that Robert had carefully constructed to keep both relationships going. "Trust your instincts," Sarah said carefully. "If something feels too good to be true, it probably is." Jess looked up sharply. "What do you mean?" Sarah made a split-second decision. "I mean that married men who are having affairs often tell the other woman exactly what she wants to hear. They say they're separated when they're not. They promise to leave their wives but never do. They make the other woman feel special while keeping their comfortable home life intact." Jess stared at Sarah for a long moment. "You sound like you're speaking from experience." "I am," Sarah said quietly. "Not as the other woman, but as the wife who didn't know her husband was lying to everyone." The color drained from Jess's face. "Who are you?" "My name is Sarah Williams. My husband is Robert Williams. I believe you know him." Jess stood up so quickly her chair rolled backward. Oh my God, I had no idea. You told me you were separated." "He said you were just waiting for the paperwork to be finalized." "We're not separated," Sarah said calmly. We live together. We sleep in the same bed every night. He tells me he loves me every morning when he leaves for work. Jess sat back down heavily, tears starting to form in her eyes. I would never have. I'm not that kind of person. I would never knowingly sleep with a married man. Sarah believed her. Jess's shock and horror seemed genuine. I know you wouldn't. Robert is a very good liar. He's been lying to both of us. How long have you known? About 6 weeks. I saw you two together at Romano's restaurant. You were wearing my grandmother's diamond bracelet. Jess touched her throat reflexively. He gave me that bracelet. He said it was his grandmother's. It was mine. He took it from my jewelry box without asking. Jess put her head in her hands. I feel so stupid. I should have known something wasn't right. Men who are really separated don't sneak around. They don't refuse to let you call them at home. They don't make you feel like you're doing something wrong. Sarah felt an unexpected wave of compassion for this woman. You're not stupid. You trusted someone you cared about. That's not a character flaw. What are you going to do? Jess asked, looking up with red-rimmed eyes. I'm divorcing him. The question is, what are you going to do? Jess was quiet for a long moment. I need to end it with Robert. And I need to tell my husband the truth. Tony deserves to know. Are you sure you want to tell Tony? It might hurt your marriage. My marriage is already hurt. I've been lying to my husband for months, sneaking around, spending money on new clothes and jewelry to impress another man. Tony's been working extra hours to pay for things I bought to look good for Robert. Fresh tears started flowing. Oh God, what have I done? Sarah reached across the table and squeezed Jess's hand. You made a mistake based on lies someone else told you. That doesn't make you a bad person. How can you be so calm about this? Aren't you angry at me? Sarah had been asking herself the same question. I'm angry at Robert. You didn't know he was lying. You didn't set out to hurt me or break up my marriage. You're as much a victim of his lies as I am. Jess wiped her eyes with a tissue. What's your plan? Are you going to confront him? Not yet. I'm building a case first. My lawyer says I need solid evidence if I want to get what I deserve in the divorce. Can I help? Sarah hadn't expected that offer. What do you mean? I mean, I have text messages from Robert. Photos he sent me. Records of all the places he took me and the money he spent. If you need evidence of the affair, I have plenty. This was an interesting development. Sarah had been planning to rely on the private investigator's surveillance, but having Jess cooperate would make everything much easier. Why would you help me? Sarah asked. Because Robert played both of us. He made me believe I was special, that what we had was real. He made me think he was leaving his wife for me. Meanwhile, he was telling you that he was working late and everything was fine. He's been living two completely different lies. Jess stood up and paced to the window. And because I've been where you are. Not with cheating, but with being lied to and manipulated. My first marriage ended because my ex-husband was stealing money from me to pay gambling debts. I swore I would never let another man make me feel that powerless again. But you said Tony is a good man. He is. That's what makes this so much worse. I have a husband who loves me and works hard for our family, and I threw it away for a man who was lying to me from day one. Jess turned back to Sarah. Maybe if we work together, we can make sure Robert faces consequences for what he's done to both of us. Sarah studied Jess's face. The other woman seemed sincere, but Sarah had learned not to trust appearances. What exactly are you suggesting? I'm suggesting we give Robert exactly what he deserves. He wants to play games with people's hearts? Let's show him what it feels like to lose everything. Sarah felt a smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. She had come here to learn about her enemy and instead found a potential ally. What did you have in mind? Robert is supposed to take me to his company's annual party next month. He told me it would be the perfect time to make our relationship public, since by then he would have told you about the divorce. Jess's eyes were bright with anger now. What if we both showed up to that party? Sarah's mind started racing. Robert's company party was a big deal. All the executives would be there, along with important clients and Robert's boss. If his affair was exposed at that event, it wouldn't just hurt his marriage. Could hurt his career too. That's actually brilliant, Sarah said slowly. But wouldn't that hurt you too? People will know you were involved with a married man. I'll deal with the consequences. I've already lost my self-respect. At least this way I can try to get some justice. Sarah looked at this woman, Robert's mistress, who should have been her enemy, and saw something she hadn't expected. She saw someone who was just as hurt and betrayed as she was. Someone who wanted Robert to pay for his lies just as much as Sarah did. Okay, Sarah said. Let's do it. But we need to plan this carefully. We only get one chance to make this work. Jess smiled for the first time since learning the truth. I think Robert is about to discover that the two women he's been lying to are much smarter than he thinks. Sarah stood up and shook Jess's hand. I think you're right. And I think he's going to regret the day he decided to play games with us. As Sarah left the real estate office, she felt something she hadn't experienced in weeks: excitement. She had started this day planning to study her enemy. Instead, she had found a partner in her quest for justice. Robert thought he was so clever, managing two relationships at once. He had no idea that the two women he had been lying to were about to join forces against him. And when they were done with him, he would understand that some games have consequences he never saw coming. Sarah never thought she would be sitting in a coffee shop planning revenge with her husband's mistress, but life had become stranger than she ever imagined. She and Jess had been meeting twice a week for the past 10 days, carefully planning their strategy for Robert's company party. I still can't believe he told you his grandmother gave him that bracelet, Jess said, stirring her latte. When I think about all the lies he told me. The bracelet was just the beginning, Sarah replied. Yesterday I found out he's been taking money from our savings account to pay for a weekend trip to Miami that he claimed was for work. Miami? Jess's eyes widened. He invited me to Miami next month. Said it was a business conference and he wanted me to come along. Sarah felt her anger flare up again. Even now, weeks after discovering the affair, Robert's lies still had the power to shock her. He's unbelievable. He was going to take both of us to the same city and somehow juggle two relationships. Or maybe he was planning to end things with one of us before the trip, Jess said thoughtfully. The question is, which one? That was a question that had been bothering Sarah. Based on Robert's text messages, he seemed genuinely attached to Jess. But he also seemed comfortable with his life at home. Maybe he had been planning to keep both relationships going indefinitely. It doesn't matter now, Sarah said. By the time that Miami trip was supposed to happen, Robert is going to have much bigger problems to worry about. They had spent hours perfecting their plan for the company party. Sarah would attend as Robert's wife, which she had every right to do. Jess would show up as his girlfriend, also believing she had every right to be there. The confrontation would happen in front of Robert's boss, his co-workers, and several important clients. But Sarah had realized they needed more than just a public confrontation. They needed to make sure Robert faced real consequences for his actions. I've been thinking about your husband, Sarah said carefully. Tony. Jess's expression became pained. I know I need to tell him. I just don't know how. What if we told him together? Not about the affair, that should come from you, but about Robert's lies. About how Robert deceived both of us. I'm not sure I understand. Sarah leaned forward. Think about it. Tony is going to be hurt and angry when he finds out about the affair. He might want to confront Robert himself. What if we gave him the chance to be part of our plan? Jess looked skeptical. Tony's not really the revenge type. He's more likely to just want me to pack my bags and leave. Maybe. Or maybe he'll want to make sure the man who helped destroy his marriage faces consequences. We won't know until we ask. That evening, Jess called Sarah with an update. I told Tony everything, she said, her voice shaky. About Robert, about the affair, about the lies. How did he take it? Better than I expected, actually. He was hurt, obviously, and angry. But mostly he seemed relieved. Relieved? He said he knew something was wrong. I'd been distant for months, coming home late, spending money we didn't have. He thought maybe I was having some kind of breakdown. Finding out it was an affair actually made more sense to him than the alternatives he had been imagining. Sarah was surprised. She had expected Tony to be furious and demand that Jess move out immediately. He wants to meet with you, Jess continued. He said any man who would lie to two women at the same time and use both of them deserves whatever he gets. He wants to help with our plan? He wants to hear the plan first. But Sarah, I think he's more angry at Robert than he is at me. He keeps saying that Robert is the one who was married and should have known better. Robert is the one who pursued me with lies. 2 days later, Sarah found herself in another coffee shop, this time meeting with Tony Martinez. He was exactly what she had expected from Jess's description. A solid, hard-working man with calloused hands and honest eyes. He looked tired, like someone who had been carrying a heavy weight. I want to thank you for how you handled this with my wife, Tony said after they had ordered their drinks. Jess told me you could have been cruel to her, but instead you helped her see the truth. She didn't know Robert was lying to her, Sarah said. We were both victims of his deception. Tony nodded. That's exactly how I see it. Jess made a mistake, but she was manipulated by someone who knew exactly what he was doing. Are you and Jess going to work things out? We're going to try. We've got some counseling sessions set up. But first, I want to make sure the man who nearly destroyed my marriage understands that actions have consequences. Sarah smiled. I was hoping you'd say that. She explained the plan for Robert's company party. Tony listened carefully, asking questions about timing and logistics. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. That's a good start, he said finally. But I think we can do better. What do you mean? I mean, embarrassing Robert at a party is one thing. But what if we could cost him his job too? Sarah's pulse quickened. How? Jess told me Robert's been spending company money on your affair, fancy dinners, hotel rooms, that Miami trip. If we could prove he's been using his expense account for personal entertainment, his company would fire him for embezzlement, Sarah finished. Exactly. And a man with no job and no wife is going to have a much harder time starting over than a man who just gets divorced. Sarah thought about this. She had been focused on ending her marriage and getting her fair share of their assets. But Tony was thinking bigger. He wanted to make sure Robert lost everything: his marriage, his job, his reputation, his future. Do you think that's too harsh? Sarah asked. Tony's expression hardened. This man spent months lying to both of you. He stole your grandmother's jewelry to give to another woman. He used your joint savings to fund an affair. He made my wife believe she was in love with someone who didn't exist. He leaned forward. No, I don't think it's too harsh. I think it's justice. Sarah made her decision. What do you need me to do? Over the next hour, Tony outlined his plan. It was more complex than what Sarah and Jess had been planning, but it was also more complete. By the time they were done, Robert wouldn't just be divorced and embarrassed. He would be unemployed, possibly facing criminal charges, and completely alone. There's one more thing, Tony said as they were getting ready to leave. I think we should invite Robert's parents to the company party. Sarah's eyes widened. Robert's parents lived 2 hours away and rarely came to company events. But they adored their son and believed he was the perfect husband. They should know what kind of man their son really is, Tony continued. And Robert should have to face them after his lies are exposed. Sarah thought about Robert's mother, who had always treated Sarah like a daughter. She thought about his father, who had taught Robert about honor and integrity. They would be devastated to learn the truth about their son. But they deserved to know. And Robert deserved to face them. You're right, Sarah said. They should be there. As Sarah drove home that evening, she reflected on how much her life had changed in just 2 months. She had gone from being a trusting wife to a woman planning an elaborate revenge scheme with her husband's mistress and her mistress's husband. But for the first time since discovering Robert's affair, Sarah felt like she was in control. She had allies now, people who understood her pain and shared her desire for justice. Together, they were going to make sure Robert paid for every lie he had told and every heart he had broken. Robert thought he was so smart, juggling 2 relationships and keeping everyone in the dark about his true nature. He had no idea that the 3 people he had betrayed were now working together against him. In 3 weeks, at his company's annual party, Robert was going to discover that some lies are too big to hide behind. And some consequences are too severe to escape. The morning of Robert's company party, Sarah woke up feeling strangely calm. After weeks of planning and preparation, today was finally the day Robert would face the consequences of his lies. She had barely slept, but she felt more alert and focused than she had in months. Robert was already in the shower, humming happily to himself. He had no idea this would be the last morning he woke up in their bed, the last morning he would pretend to be a loving husband while secretly planning to see his mistress later. Big day today, Robert said when he came out of the bathroom, toweling his hair. I'm really looking forward to tonight's party. It's going to be special. Sarah bet it would be. Are you excited about something in particular? I don't know. I have a feeling this party is going to change everything. If only he knew how right he was. Sarah had taken the day off work, claiming she needed time to get ready for the party. In reality, she needed time for final preparations. At 10 a.m., she met with Margaret Peterson, her lawyer, to go over the divorce papers one last time. Everything is ready, Margaret said, sliding the papers across her desk. As soon as tonight's events unfold, we can file these first thing Monday morning. With the evidence we've gathered, plus what happens tonight, Robert won't have much room to negotiate. What about the financial stuff? That's the beautiful part. By using marital assets to fund his affair, Robert has actually made our case stronger. We can ask for more than half of everything as compensation for his misuse of joint funds. Sarah signed the papers with a steady hand. After tonight, there would be no going back. Her next stop was to meet Jess and Tony for a final strategy session. They gathered at Tony's construction site, where they could talk privately without worrying about being overheard. I confirmed with Robert's parents, Jess reported. I called his mother yesterday and told her I was a friend from his company. I said we were throwing Robert a surprise recognition ceremony at tonight's party and thought his family should be there. She was so excited. Sarah felt a pang of guilt about deceiving Robert's mother, but it passed quickly. Mrs. Williams deserved to know what kind of man her son had become. What about the financial evidence? Sarah asked Tony. I've got copies of all the expense reports Robert filed for dinners and hotels he used for dates with Jess. I also have receipts from the jewelry store and proof that he charged the Miami trip to his company credit card. Tony held up a thick folder. This should be enough to get him fired and possibly prosecuted. How are you going to get this information to his boss? I'm not. You are. Tony handed Sarah the folder. You're going to be at the party as his wife. When everything comes out tonight, you're going to be shocked and hurt. And in your emotional state, you're going to tell his boss that you think Robert has been stealing from the company to pay for his affair. It was a good plan. Sarah's reaction would seem natural and spontaneous, not like something that had been carefully orchestrated. What time are you planning to arrive? Sarah asked Jess. 8:30. That's when Robert told me to come. He said by then he would have already told you about us and you would have left. Sarah almost laughed. Robert had planned to tell his wife about his affair at his company party, in front of all his colleagues? The arrogance was stunning. I'll make sure to stick close to Robert all evening, Sarah said. That way, when you arrive and introduce yourself as his girlfriend, the maximum number of people will witness it. They went over the timeline one more time. Sarah would arrive with Robert at 7 p.m. They would mingle, have dinner, and participate in the usual company party activities. At 8:30, Jess would arrive and approach Robert, expecting to be introduced as his girlfriend. The confrontation would happen in front of everyone. Then Tony would step forward and introduce himself as Jess's husband. Robert's parents would realize what was happening. And Sarah would discover the financial evidence and share it with Robert's boss. By 9 p.m., Robert's life as he knew it would be over. Are we sure we want to do this? Jess asked suddenly. I mean, this is going to destroy him completely. Sarah looked at this woman who had become an unexpected ally. He destroyed our lives first. He lied to you for months, making you believe you were in a real relationship with a man who was available. He stole from me and betrayed 8 years of marriage. He hurt Tony by pursuing his wife with lies and manipulation. Sarah's right, Tony added. Robert made his choices. Now he gets to live with the consequences. That afternoon, Sarah went home and began getting ready for the party. She chose her outfit carefully, a black dress that was elegant but not too flashy, jewelry that was beautiful but not ostentatious. She wanted to look like the perfect wife, which would make Robert's betrayal seem even worse. As she was doing her makeup, Robert came home early from work. I wanted to spend some time with my beautiful wife before the party, he said, kissing her neck. You look amazing. Thank you. Sarah continued applying her lipstick with a steady hand. Are you looking forward to tonight? More than you know. Robert loosened his tie and sat on their bed. Sarah, I need to tell you something. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. Was Robert actually going to confess? Was he going to ruin their plan by telling her about Jess before they got to the party? What is it? She asked, turning to face him. I just want you to know how much I love you. How grateful I am for everything you've done to support my career. Tonight feels like the beginning of something new for us. Sarah stared at her husband. Even now, hours before his world collapsed, he was still lying to her face. He was still pretending to be the loving husband while planning to publicly humiliate her at his company party. I love you too, Sarah said, because it was what he expected to hear. But inside, she felt nothing but cold determination. At 6:30, they left for the party. Robert was in a great mood, talking excitedly about his co-workers and his recent projects. He seemed genuinely happy, like a man who believed his life was perfect. Sarah listened and smiled and played the role of the supportive wife one last time. In 2 hours, Robert would discover that his perfect life had been built on lies, and lies always eventually collapse. As they pulled into the hotel parking lot where the party was being held, Sarah saw Tony's truck in the corner of the lot. Jess would be arriving soon. Robert's parents' car was already there. Sarah recognized it from family visits. Everything was in place. All the pieces were on the board. Now all Sarah had to do was wait for the game to begin. Ready? Robert asked, offering her his arm. I'm ready, Sarah said. And she was. She was ready to watch Robert's house of lies come crashing down. She was ready to see him face the consequences of his choices. She was ready to start her new life, free from a man who had never deserved her love or trust. Robert opened the hotel door for her, and Sarah walked into what would be the last evening of their marriage. The hotel ballroom was decorated with white lights and gold accents, creating an elegant atmosphere for Robert's company's annual celebration. Sarah recognized most of the faces from previous year's parties: Robert's colleagues, their spouses, important clients, and senior management. Everyone was dressed in their finest, wine glasses in hand, celebrating another successful year. Robert, Sarah. Robert's boss, Mr. Henderson, approached them with a warm smile. "So glad you could make it. Robert, I was just telling the Jameson account team about your presentation last week. Outstanding work." "Thank you, sir," Robert replied, standing a little straighter. Sarah could see how much he valued his boss's approval, how proud he was of his professional reputation. In an hour, that reputation would be destroyed. Robert's parents spotted them from across the room and hurried over. His mother, Carol, embraced Sarah warmly. "Sarah, dear, you look beautiful. And Robert, so handsome in that suit." Carol beamed at her son. "We're so proud of you both. When that nice young woman from your company called and said you were being recognized tonight, we couldn't miss it." Sarah felt another stab of guilt, but pushed it away. Carol would learn the truth soon enough. "What recognition?" Robert asked, looking confused. "Oh, it's supposed to be a surprise," Carol said, winking. "We won't spoil it." Robert looked puzzled but pleased. He probably assumed it was some kind of promotion or award. Sarah almost felt sorry for him. Almost. They made their way through the crowd, Robert introducing Sarah to clients she had never met and catching up with colleagues. Sarah played her part perfectly, smiling and making small talk while keeping one eye on the entrance. It was 8:15 p.m. "Ladies and gentlemen," the master of ceremonies announced, "dinner is served." As they moved toward the dining area, Sarah noticed Tony standing near the bar, wearing a suit she had never seen him in before. He looked nervous but determined. Their eyes met briefly across the room and he gave her a small nod. Sarah and Robert were seated at a table with other senior staff members and their spouses. The conversation was light and professional, talk of quarterly reports, new clients, company growth. Robert was in his element, charming and confident, telling stories that made everyone laugh. "You're so lucky to have such an entertaining husband," said Janet Morrison, the wife of Robert's colleague. "Mark is sweet, but he never makes me laugh the way Robert makes you laugh." Sarah smiled and squeezed Robert's hand. "He's certainly full of surprises." At 8:25, Sarah excused herself to go to the restroom. She needed to be away from the table when Jess arrived so she could witness the confrontation from a distance. She positioned herself near the entrance where she had a clear view of Robert's table. At exactly 8:30, the ballroom doors opened and Jess walked in. She looked stunning in a red dress that hugged her curves perfectly. Her hair was styled in loose waves, and she wore the diamond earrings Robert had bought her, the ones that had cost $1,500 of Sarah and Robert's joint money. Jess scanned the room until she spotted Robert at his table. Sarah watched as Jess's face lit up with a smile and she began walking toward him. Robert saw her coming and his face went white. He looked around frantically as if searching for an escape route, but there was nowhere to go. His parents were sitting right beside him. His boss was 2 seats away. Half the company was watching. "Robert," Jess called out as she approached the table, her voice carrying across the room. "Sorry I'm a little late, darling. Traffic was terrible." The conversation at Robert's table stopped. Everyone turned to look at this beautiful woman who had just called Robert darling in front of his wife. Robert stood up shakily. "Jess, what are you doing here?" "What do you mean, what am I doing here? You invited me, remember? You said tonight was the night we were going public with our relationship." Jess looked around the table with confusion. "You said you were going to tell Sarah about us, and then we could finally be together openly." Sarah heard Carol Williams gasp. She heard Mr. Henderson's wine glass hit the table. She heard the rustling of fabric as everyone in the immediate area turned to stare. "Who is this woman, Robert?" Carol asked, her voice shaking. Before Robert could answer, Tony appeared behind Jess. "I can answer that," Tony said loudly enough for half the room to hear. "This is my wife, Jessica Martinez. She's been having an affair with your son for the past 6 months." The silence in the ballroom was deafening. Sarah could see people at other tables starting to turn and look, trying to figure out what was happening. Your wife," Carol stammered. "That's right," Tony continued. My wife, who believed your son was separated and getting divorced. My wife, who had no idea she was sleeping with a married man because your son lied to her about everything. Robert finally found his voice. This isn't, there's been a misunderstanding. The only misunderstanding, Sarah said, stepping forward so everyone could see her, is that I trusted my husband. Robert spun around to face her, his face now completely pale. Sarah, I can explain. Explain what? How you stole my grandmother's bracelet to give to your girlfriend. How you've been using our joint savings to fund your affair. How you were planning to humiliate me at your company party. Mr. Henderson stood up. Robert, what is going on here? I think I can clarify that, Sarah said, pulling out the folder Tony had given her. Robert has been using company funds to pay for his affair. Expensive dinners charged to his business account. Hotel rooms for romantic getaways. Even a trip to Miami that he claimed was for business but was actually planned as a vacation with his girlfriend. She handed the folder to Mr. Henderson, who opened it with shaking hands. As he flipped through the documents, his expression grew darker. Robert, Mr. Henderson said slowly, these expense reports, these charges, you've been embezzling from the company. No, it's not like that. Robert looked around desperately, but every face was staring at him with shock, disgust, or disappointment. I can pay it back. It was just, I made some mistakes. Some mistakes. Jess said, tears starting to flow down her cheeks. You destroyed my marriage with your lies. You made me believe you loved me. I do love you, Robert said desperately. I love both of you. I was trying to find a way to make it work. By lying to everyone? Tony stepped closer to Robert. By making my wife think she was in love with a single man? By stealing from your company to pay for dates with her? Carol Williams was crying now, her husband's arm around her shoulders. Robert, how could you do this? How could you hurt so many people? Robert looked around the room one more time. Every face he saw reflected the same emotions: shock, disappointment, disgust. His colleagues, his clients, his boss, his parents, his wife, his mistress's husband, everyone he had lied to was staring at him. Robert started to speak, then stopped. There was nothing he could say. No explanation that would make any of this better. No lie that would get him out of this situation. Security, Mr. Henderson called out. Please escort Mr. Williams from the building. He's no longer employed by this company. As two security guards approached, Robert made one last desperate attempt to salvage something from the wreckage of his life. Sarah, please, he said, reaching for her hand. We can work this out. We can go to counseling. I'll end things with Jess. I'll pay back the company. We can start over. Sarah looked at the man she had been married to for 8 years. The man she had loved and trusted and supported. The man who had betrayed everything they had built together. No, Robert, she said calmly. We can't. Tomorrow morning you'll be served with divorce papers. Tonight you can figure out where you're going to sleep because you're not welcome in our house anymore. As security escorted Robert from the ballroom, Sarah heard whispers starting throughout the room. The story of what had just happened would be told and retold. Robert's reputation was destroyed not just at his company, but throughout their industry. Sarah looked around and saw Jess crying in Tony's arms. She saw Robert's parents consoling each other. She saw Mr. Henderson already on his phone, probably calling the company's lawyers. The plan had worked perfectly. Robert had lost his job, his wife, his girlfriend, his reputation, and his family's respect all in the span of 10 minutes. He would face criminal charges for embezzlement. He would go through a divorce where he had no leverage. His lies had finally caught up with him. For the first time in months, Sarah felt free. 3 days after the company party, Sarah was sitting in her kitchen drinking coffee when the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, she saw Robert standing on their front porch, looking like he hadn't slept in days. His usually perfect hair was messy, his clothes were wrinkled, and his eyes were red-rimmed. Sarah had been expecting this visit. She opened the door but didn't invite him in. Sarah, please, Robert said immediately. We need to talk. I know you're angry, but we can work through this. There's nothing to work through, Robert. My lawyer will be in touch with yours. You filed for divorce? Robert looked genuinely shocked, as if he had believed he could somehow talk his way out of this situation. Yesterday morning. Along with a restraining order that says you can't come within 50 feet of me or this house. You're violating it right now. A restraining order? Sarah, I would never hurt you. You know that. I thought I knew a lot of things about you that turned out to be wrong. Sarah stepped back from the door. You have 10 minutes to get off my property before I call the police. Where am I supposed to go? I lost my job. I can't afford a hotel much longer. This is my home too. Sarah felt a flicker of the compassion that had once made her love this man, but it passed quickly. You should have thought about that before you decided to steal from your company and cheat on your wife. I never meant for any of this to happen. I love you, Sarah. I've always loved you. You don't steal from people you love. You don't lie to them every day for months. You don't humiliate them in front of their friends and family. Sarah's voice was steady and calm. You love yourself, Robert. You always have. That's the problem. Robert's shoulders sagged. What about counseling? What about working on our marriage? 8 years has to mean something. It did mean something. To me. But apparently not to you. Sarah could see Robert starting to get angry. His face was flushing and his hands were clenching into fists. This was the reaction she had been expecting. When charm and begging didn't work, Robert would try intimidation. You planned this whole thing, didn't you? He said, his voice getting louder. The way Jess showed up at the party. The way her husband was there. The way you had all those financial documents ready. You set me up. I documented your lies and let you face the consequences of your choices. That's not a setup, Robert. That's justice. Justice? You destroyed my life. You cost me my job, my reputation, everything I worked for. You destroyed your own life. I just made sure everyone else knew what kind of man you really are. Robert stepped closer to the door and Sarah quickly moved to close it. But he put his hand against it, stopping her. You're not going to get away with this, he said, his voice low and threatening. I'll fight the divorce. I'll make sure you don't get anything. I'll tell everyone what a cold, calculating bitch you really are. Sarah pulled out her phone and started recording. Please continue. My lawyer loves it when people make threats. Robert realized what she was doing and stepped back. Sarah, I didn't mean. I'm just upset. I'm not thinking clearly. You're thinking more clearly than you have in months. This is who you really are when you can't manipulate people anymore. This is who you were the whole time we were married. I was just too trusting to see it. Sarah closed the door and locked it. Through the window, she watched Robert stand on her porch for another few minutes before finally walking back to his car. A rental, since his expensive car had been repossessed along with everything else he couldn't afford. An hour later, Sarah's phone rang. It was Margaret Peterson, her lawyer. Robert's attorney just called, Margaret said. Robert wants to negotiate a settlement. What kind of settlement? He's offering to give you the house and half the savings in exchange for not pursuing the embezzlement charges. Sarah laughed. He's not in a position to negotiate. What did you tell his lawyer? I told him that ship has sailed. Robert used marital assets to fund an affair, then stole from his company. He's lucky if he avoids prison time. He's in no position to make demands. Good. What happens next? We proceed with the divorce as planned. With the evidence we have, plus his public humiliation at the company party, Robert doesn't have much choice but to accept our terms. You'll get the house, most of the savings, and half his retirement account. He'll be responsible for his own legal fees and any restitution he has to pay his former company. After hanging up with Margaret, Sarah felt a sense of closure beginning to settle over her. For months she had felt powerless and confused. Now she felt like herself again, strong, capable, and in control of her own life. That afternoon Jess called. How are you holding up? Sarah asked. Better than I expected. Tony and I had a long talk with our counselor yesterday. It's going to take time, but I think we're going to make it through this. I'm glad. You both deserve to be happy. What about you? Any word from Robert? Sarah told Jess about Robert's visit and his lawyer's settlement offer. He's really not going to get anything, is he? Jess said. He's going to get exactly what he deserves. Which is nothing. I keep thinking about how confident he was that night at the party. Right up until I walked in, he really believed he was going to get away with everything. That's what happens when you start believing your own lies. Robert convinced himself that he was smarter than everyone else, that he could manage 2 relationships indefinitely without consequences. He forgot that other people aren't stupid. Do you think he really loved either of us? Or was it all just manipulation? Sarah had been thinking about that question too. I think Robert loves the idea of being loved. He liked having 2 women who adored him and supported him and made him feel important. But I don't think he's capable of actually loving anyone besides himself. 2 weeks later, Sarah received the final divorce papers. Robert had signed everything without further negotiation. According to Margaret, he was facing potential criminal charges and couldn't afford to fight the divorce too. He's also been ordered to pay restitution to his former company, Margaret reported. $23,000 plus interest. that should keep him busy for a while. Sarah signed the papers with a steady hand. After 8 years of marriage, it was strange how quickly it could all be reduced to legal documents and financial settlements. But she felt relief more than sadness. That evening, Sarah called her sister Lisa to share the news. "It's finally over," Sarah said. "I'm officially divorced." "How do you feel?" "Free. For the first time in months, I feel like I can breathe normally again." "What's next? Are you going to stay in the house?" "For now. I love this house and I put too much work into it to give it up. Besides, all my memories of this place aren't bad. Most of them are from before Robert started lying to me." "Have you thought about dating again?" Sarah laughed. "I think I need some time to remember who I am when I'm not married to someone. I spent 8 years being Robert's wife. Now I want to figure out who Sarah is on her own." But even as she said it, Sarah realized she was already figuring that out. She was someone who didn't give up when things got difficult. She was someone who could plan and execute complex strategies. She was someone who could turn the tables on people who tried to manipulate her. She was stronger than she had ever known. The next morning, Sarah woke up in her own house, in her own bed, with no one to lie to her or manipulate her or make her question her own judgment. She made coffee in her own kitchen and sat at her own table and read the newspaper in complete peace. Her phone buzzed with a text from Tony. "Jess and I wanted to thank you again for helping us see the truth about Robert. We're doing much better now." Sarah smiled and texted back, "I'm glad. You both deserve happiness." It was true. Tony and Jess had been victims of Robert's lies just like she had. They deserved to rebuild their marriage on a foundation of honesty instead of deception. As for Robert, Sarah hadn't heard from him since his visit to her house. According to Margaret, he was living in a small apartment across town and working as a delivery driver while he looked for another job in marketing. No reputable company would hire him after what had happened at his previous job, so he was probably going to have to start over in a different field entirely. Sarah felt no satisfaction in Robert's downfall, but she felt no sympathy either. He had made his choices and now he was living with the consequences. That was how the world was supposed to work. The best part of Sarah's new life was the quiet. No more wondering where Robert really was when he claimed to be working late. No more noticing small changes in his behavior and wondering what they meant. No more lying awake at night with a nagging feeling that something was wrong. Now when Sarah said she was going to have a quiet evening at home, that's exactly what she did. When she made plans for the weekend, she didn't have to check with anyone else or worry about conflicting schedules or hidden agendas. For the first time in years, Sarah's life belonged entirely to her. And she was going to make the most of it. 6 months after her divorce was finalized, Sarah barely recognized her own life. She had spent so many years defining herself as Robert's wife that she had forgotten who she was as just Sarah. Now she was rediscovering that person and she liked what she found. The house looked completely different. Sarah had redecorated every room, choosing colors and furniture that reflected her own taste rather than what she thought a married couple should have. The walls were brighter, the furniture was more comfortable, and every single item in the house was something she had chosen for herself. Her career had taken off too. Word had spread in the business community about how she had uncovered Robert's financial deception, and several companies had reached out to hire her as a consultant to review their expense account procedures. Sarah had started her own accounting firm specializing in financial fraud detection. "It's ironic," she told Lisa over lunch. "Robert's lies ended up being the best thing that ever happened to my career." "You always were too smart for that job you had before," Lisa said. "Now you're finally doing something that challenges you." Sarah's new business was already successful beyond her expectations. Companies valued her expertise and she found the work fascinating. Every case was like solving a puzzle, looking for patterns and inconsistencies that revealed the truth behind the numbers. "Speaking of challenges," Lisa continued, "when are you going to start dating again?" "I'm not ready yet." It was the same answer Sarah had been giving for months, but lately she was starting to wonder if it was still true. "Sarah, it's been over a year since you found out about Robert's affair. You're allowed to be happy with someone else." "I'm happy. I love my work, I love my house, I love my independence. Why would I want to complicate that? Because the right person won't complicate your life. They'll enhance it." That afternoon, Sarah was working in her home office when the doorbell rang. She wasn't expecting anyone, so she approached the door cautiously. Through the peephole, she saw a man in a delivery uniform holding a large bouquet of flowers. "Delivery for Sarah Williams," he said when she opened the door. Sarah accepted the flowers with confusion. She couldn't imagine who would be sending her flowers. The card read, "Thank you for helping me find the truth. I hope you're as happy as you deserve to be, Jess. Sarah smiled and brought the flowers inside. She had kept in touch with Jess occasionally over the past few months. Jess and Tony were doing well in counseling and had recently renewed their wedding vows in a small ceremony with just their families present. As Sarah was arranging the flowers in a vase, her phone rang. It was Margaret Peterson. I have some news about Robert, Margaret said. He's been arrested. Sarah felt her stomach tighten. For what? Embezzlement. Apparently, he got a job at a small marketing firm 2 months ago and was caught stealing from their petty cash fund. His new employer pressed charges. Sarah sat down heavily. She had hoped Robert would learn from his mistakes and try to rebuild his life honestly. Apparently, he had learned nothing. What does this mean for me? Nothing directly. Your divorce is final and you're not responsible for his actions. But Sarah, this shows that what he did to you wasn't a one-time mistake. This is a pattern of behavior. You were right to leave him. After hanging up, Sarah felt a complicated mix of emotions. She was sad that Robert seemed incapable of change. She was angry that he had hurt new people with his lies and theft. But mostly she felt grateful that she had discovered his true nature when she did, before wasting any more years of her life with someone who would never be trustworthy. That evening, Sarah decided to treat herself to dinner at a nice restaurant downtown. She had gotten comfortable eating alone over the past few months, something that would have embarrassed her when she was married but now felt like a sign of independence. She was reading a book while waiting for her appetizer when someone approached her table. Excuse me, are you Sarah Williams? Sarah looked up to see a man about her age with kind eyes and a warm smile. He was tall and well-dressed, with the confident posture of someone who was comfortable in his own skin. Yes, I am. Do we know each other? Not directly. I'm David Chin. I own the restaurant 2 blocks down from here. I heard about your new consulting business from mutual friends, and I've been hoping to meet you. Oh. Sarah closed her book and gestured to the empty chair across from her. Would you like to sit down? I don't want to interrupt your dinner. Please. I'd welcome the company. David sat down and immediately made Sarah feel at ease. He had started his restaurant 3 years ago after leaving a corporate job that was making him miserable. He was passionate about food and hospitality, and his enthusiasm was infectious. I heard about what happened with your ex-husband, David said carefully. I hope this isn't inappropriate to say, but the way you handled that situation was impressive. A lot of people would have just confronted him privately and tried to save their marriage. I thought about that. But Robert didn't just betray me, he betrayed his girlfriend, her husband, his parents, his employer, and everyone who trusted him. Private confrontation would have just given him the chance to come up with new lies. That's exactly what I mean. You saw the bigger picture. You made sure everyone who was being hurt by his deception learned the truth. Sarah found herself telling David about the months of investigation, the careful planning, the alliance with Jess and Tony. She had never told the whole story to anyone except Lisa, but David was easy to talk to. He listened without judgment and asked thoughtful questions. What amazes me, David said when she finished, is that you came out of such a betrayal stronger instead of bitter. A lot of people would be afraid to trust anyone after going through what you went through. I'm not afraid to trust people, Sarah realized as she said it. I'm just better at recognizing when someone is trustworthy. Robert showed me all the warning signs of deception. I just ignored them because I wanted to believe the best about my husband. And now I pay attention to what people do, not just what they say. I trust people who are consistent, honest, and reliable. People whose actions match their words. They talked through dinner and dessert, covering everything from business to books to travel. David was intelligent and funny, with a dry sense of humor that made Sarah laugh more than she had in months. When the evening ended, he asked if he could see her again. I'd like that, Sarah said, and was surprised to realize she meant it. Over the next few weeks, Sarah and David went on several dates. He took her to art galleries and farmers markets and small concerts in the park. He introduced her to food she had never tried and books she had never read. He made her feel curious about the world again in a way she hadn't since college. Most importantly, David was exactly who he appeared to be. When he said he would call, he called. When he made plans, he kept them. When he talked about his past, his stories were consistent and verifiable. Sarah found herself relaxing around him in a way she hadn't realized was possible. You're different from the woman I met 6 months ago, Lisa observed when they had lunch together. You seem lighter. I feel lighter. For the first time in years, I'm not carrying around the weight of someone else's lies. Is it serious with David? Sarah considered the question. It could be. But I'm not in a hurry. I'm enjoying getting to know him without pressure or expectations. If it develops into something more serious, that's great. If not, I'm still happy with my life. That was the difference between her relationship with David and her marriage to Robert. With Robert, she had been so focused on making the relationship work that she had ignored obvious problems. With David, she was letting the relationship develop naturally while paying attention to how she felt and how he treated her. 3 months later, David asked Sarah to move in with him. She said no, but not because she didn't care about him. I've spent most of my adult life living with someone else, she explained. I want to hold on to my independence for a while longer. Maybe someday we'll live together, but right now I like having my own space. David didn't pressure her or try to change her mind. He simply said he understood and that he was happy to take things at her pace. That response told Sarah everything she needed to know about the kind of man David was. He respected her boundaries and her autonomy. He wanted to be with her, but he didn't need to control her or possess her to feel secure in their relationship. A year after meeting David, Sarah received a wedding invitation from Jess and Tony. They were renewing their vows again, this time in a bigger celebration with all their friends and family. Sarah was honored to be invited. At the ceremony, Sarah watched Jess and Tony exchange vows they had written themselves, promising to be honest with each other and to never take their love for granted. They looked genuinely happy, not just relieved to have survived Robert's deception, but excited about their future together. They look good together, David said, taking Sarah's hand as they watched the couple dance. They do. They almost lost each other because of Robert's lies, but in some ways, going through that experience together made their marriage stronger. Do you think you'll ever want to get married again? David asked. Sarah looked at this man who had brought so much joy into her life. Maybe someday. But if I do, it will be because I want to celebrate my love for someone, not because I need security or validation. And it will be with someone who enhances my life instead of trying to control it. David smiled and kissed her hand. That sounds like a good plan. As Sarah watched Jess and Tony celebrate their renewed commitment to each other, she reflected on how much her life had changed since that night at Romano's restaurant when she first saw another woman wearing her grandmother's bracelet. She had lost a marriage, but she had gained something more valuable, the knowledge that she was strong enough to survive betrayal and smart enough to build a better life for herself. She had lost a husband who lied to her, but she had found a partner who respected her. She had lost the illusion of a perfect marriage, but she had gained the reality of genuine happiness. Robert had thought he was so clever, managing 2 relationships at once while lying to everyone. But in the end, his deception had freed Sarah to discover who she really was and what she really deserved. As the evening ended and David drove her home to her own house, the house she had fought for and won, the house that was completely and entirely hers, Sarah realized that Robert's betrayal had been the best thing that ever happened to her. She was no longer Robert's wife. She was no longer defined by someone else's lies or limited by someone else's expectations. She was Sarah Williams, successful businesswoman, loyal friend, loving partner, and the strongest person she knew. And she had never been happier in her life.